This is part 2 of Jesus' early years. My early life and experiences in the desert. I was born in Palestine. My mother was convinced that I would be a Messiah. Contrary to popular belief, I was not a saintly child. When taken to the temple, aged 12 years old, to be interviewed by the chief priests to determine whether I would be fit to enter Jewish religious training, I was rejected as being too opinionated. Bitterly disappointed, my mother took me home again and did her best to raise me. So she had taken him over to the Jewish elders to try to get him into some kind of schooling to, help him because he was outrageous as a child, and he did a lot of disappointing things to his mother. Um, Afterwards, my mother took me home again and did her best to raise me in the sanctity which marked her own demeanor at all times. This was an impossible task, for I was above all things an individualist and unruly in behavior. I resented my mother's guidance and her attempted discipline as a youth. I became unmanageable, a true rebel. I rejected my mother's staunch adherence to the Jewish faith and traditions, preferring laughter to sanctimonious attitudes. I refused to learn a trade which would have bound me down to routine. I chose to mix with all and sundry of the poorer classes, drank with men, knew prostitutes, and enjoyed talking, arguing, laughing, and being home idle. When I needed money, I went into the vineyards for a day or two to look for other jobs paying me enough to eat and drink and give me the leisure life. For all my many shortcomings as a human being, my careless, easy attitudes, my self-will, and egotistic determination to think my thoughts, irrespective of what others might try to tell me, I cared about people very deeply. I was deeply emotional. In your present speech forms, you would call me over reactive, over emotional. I had a warm, compassionate, empathetic heart. I was deeply moved in the presence of sickness, affliction, and poverty. I was a staunch supporter of what you call the underdog. You might say I was a people person. I lived with them closely in a spirit of camaraderie. I listened to their woes, understood, and cared. It is important to understand that my true origins and my early youthful characteristics became these. These were the goals which pushed and prodded me into eventual Christhood. What I most strongly detested and resisted was the misery, the sickness, and poverty I saw around me. It infuriated me, and I became passionately angry to see people dressed in rags, thin and hungry, dressed, crippled, diseased, crippled, yet heartlessly browbeaten by Jewish leaders who burdened them with meaningless traditional laws and observances, threatening them with Jehovah's punishment if they did not obey. I declared to all who would listen to me that these poor people had enough to bear without being crushed by senseless measures, restrictive of pleasure. What good was the point of life if they were all not born to be happy? I refused to believe in a just God according to Jewish traditions. The biblical prophetic warnings of Jehovah's judgment and anger against people disgusted me. People were human, after all, doing whatever that their human nature prompted them to do. They had been born sinful, so why should they be judged and condemned to lives of suffering and poverty because they had broken the 10 commandments? What was the sense in such statements? To me, this Jewish belief depicted an illogical, cruel God, and I wanted nothing to do with him. It seemed to me that if such deity existed, it followed that mankind was doomed to eternal misery. The simplicity and freedom I found on the hillside, the plains and the lakes and the mountains refreshed my innermost spirit and quieted my angry murmurings against the Jewish God. Consequently, I refused to believe a word that the Jewish elders tried to teach me. However, during my middle 20s, a new line of questionings to possession of my thoughts. As I walked ever more frequently alone in the hills, my rebellion was gradually replaced by an all-consuming longing to know and understand the true nature of that which must surely inspire and respire. Through creation, I reviewed my lifestyle and saw what suffering my actions had caused my mother and many other people. Although I felt such deep compassion for the weak and suffering, my rebellious nature had prompted such thoughtfulness and selfish behavior towards my family. My underlying love for them now welled up in me, and I found myself becoming equally rebellious against my past behavior. I heard talk about John the Baptist and the work he was doing amongst the Jews who came to listen to his words, and even from Jerusalem. I decided to visit him and to be baptized myself. On my way to the River Jordan, I felt exhilarated to the prospect of being baptized and starting a new life. I knew that despite my unruly emotionalism, that I had been born with a keen intelligence and a gift for insightful, impressive debate, which I had used willfully and negatively, leading people into unruly arguments. I had thrown my talents away by pursuing a life of self-will, idleness, and pleasure, and as a result, I have forfeited all respect from others. Neither did I possess any self-respect. For the first time, I found this to be intolerable. It occurred to me that in the future I could and must put my natural gifts to better use instead of just making a noise. Perhaps I could find a way to lighten the burdens of those whom I deeply pitied. Up to that time, I had been of little practical use to anyone. This is Jesus talking about how throughout his whole life, like there's a much not said about his early years and all the years that were missing, because he wasn't doing much of anything. He says he was literally, just drinking and hanging out with hookers and bringing, his mother was a wreck because he literally, brought all this shame down on their household and stuff. And, I guess I should have made this video the first one and then the other one the second one, but this is the second video, and I'm trying to tell you about he went to John the Baptist, got baptized, went up into the desert for 6 weeks, and then came out of that and was able to heal people. And never before that was he able to do any of these things. So this is part 2.